Imagine sitting in a classroom where almost everyone understands the teacher's directions except you. The teacher tells the class to gather their supplies, open their notebooks, and grab a yellow marker. Everyone around you immediately begins working, but you are still trying to understand what was said. Now imagine, instead of recognizing that you are confused, the teacher assumes you are ignoring their directions. Your classmates notice that you are behind, and some of them begin teasing you. Eventually, you stop asking questions entirely because speaking up has become embarrassing. For many students with communication difficulties, situations like this can shape their entire school experience. As a future school-based speech-language pathologist, or SLP, I wanted to understand what actually helps these students, not only inside of a therapy room, but also throughout the school day. I completed 2 field experiences. For the first, I interviewed a school-based SLP. Second, I interviewed and shadowed a special education teacher who later became an administrator. To protect both their privacy, I will refer to them only by their professional roles. These experiences helped me form my educational stance. Successful special education should be collaborative, individualized, and based on the understanding that a student's behavior may be communicating an unmet need. Based on my field experiences and the educational psychology theories from this course, here are 4 lessons I believe every beginning school-based SLP and educator should know. Tip number 1. Confusion can look like defiance. The first lesson is simple. Before labeling a student's behavior, find out what the student understands. During my interview, the SLP explained that students with specific language impairment, or otherwise called SLIs, may have typical cognitive abilities while still having difficulty processing language. A student may understand individual words, but struggle when several directions are combined into one long sentence. Background noise, unfamiliar vocabulary, and the speed of the teacher's speech can make that challenge even greater. From the teacher's perspective, the entire class heard the same directions and most students follow them. Therefore, it can appear that the one student who did not begin the task is refusing to participate, when in reality, the student may be confused, overwhelmed, or frustrated. Research has found that teachers may sometimes interpret the effects of SLIs as bad behavior or disobedience rather than a communication need. This connects with scaffolding. Scaffolding means giving temporary support that helps a learner complete something they cannot yet complete independently. The special educator described several examples. She simplified her wording, broke directions into smaller parts, modeled tasks, checked for understanding, and gave students additional processing time. The theory matched what I learned in the field because students did not always need the task removed or made permanently easier. Sometimes they needed the information presented in a more accessible way. Once the student understood the task, the educator could gradually reduce the support. For a beginning SLP or teacher, this means using short and direct sentences, giving 1 or 2 steps at a time, supporting spoken directions with pictures or written keywords, and asking the student to explain the direction back to them in their own words. Instead of only asking, "Do you understand?" ask, "What are you going to do first?" That gives the educator real evidence of understanding. Most importantly, do not immediately assume that non-participation equals laziness or disrespect. Investigate the communication demand first. Tip number 2, safety comes before participation. The second lesson is that students are more likely to communicate when communication feels safe. The school-based SLP told me that some students with articulation difficulties or stuttering had trouble advocating for themselves. These students could understand the lesson and knew what they wanted to say, but repeated teasing made speaking feel risky. After enough negative experiences, they began speaking up less often. This connects with Bandura's concept of self-efficacy, or a person's belief that they can successfully perform a task. A student's confidence is shaped partly by previous experiences and by the reactions of people around them. If speaking leads to embarrassment, the student may begin to expect failure or rejection. However, successful communication experiences and supportive feedback can help rebuild that confidence. The field experience supported this theory. But it also showed me that communication confidence is not solely an individual trait. The environment matters. We cannot tell a student to be confident while allowing classmates to mock the way that student communicates. The SLP said that she stops others teasing immediately and works to create a space where students can speak without judgment. The special educator made a similar point while showing me classrooms designed to feel comfortable and welcoming. The softer lighting, flexible seating, and calm atmosphere were intentional. The room was not only a place to complete academic work, it was also supposed to feel safe enough for the students to participate. Beginning educators can apply this by establishing clear expectations about respecting different communication styles, giving students sufficient time to answer, and praising meaningful effort without making the student feel singled out. Educators should avoid interrupting, rushing, or finishing student sentences unless the student asks for that assistance. This is especially important for self-advocacy. Students need opportunities to request help, express discomfort, make choices, and say when they do not understand. Communication is not successful merely because a student produces the correct sound during therapy. It is successful when the student feels able to use communication in real life. Tip number 3, model first, then let the student try. The third lesson is that explaining a task is not always enough. Sometimes students need to see what success looks like. The special educator described modeling tasks multiple times when students did not understand what she wanted. She would demonstrate the behavior, simplify her directions, allow additional response time, and then ask the students to show or explain what came next. This connects directly with Bandura's social cognitive theory. Bandura proposed that people can learn by observing the actions of others and the consequences that follow those actions. Modeling gives students a clear example to imitate instead of requiring them to create a mental picture from complicated verbal instructions. The field experience strongly supported the theory. However, it also demonstrated that simply showing a behavior once may not be enough. A learner must pay attention to the model, remember what happened, be capable of reproducing the action, and have a reason to attempt it. Some students may need repeated demonstrations, visual supports, guided practice, or physical access to accommodations. For example, instead of only telling a student how to organize a narrative, an SLP could demonstrate a short story using a visual organizer. The SLP and student could complete the next example together. After that, the student could try independently, while the SLP provides feedback. This combines modeling with scaffolding and gradually transfers responsibility to the learner, which is what we want. The same approach works across content areas. A teacher can model how to solve a math problem, identify the main idea of a passage, begin a writing assignment, enter a group conversation, or request clarification. The goal is to not make the student depend on adult help. The goal is rather to provide enough support for the student to eventually succeed without it. Tip number 4. You cannot do this job alone. The fourth lesson is that effective special education requires collaboration. Both professionals discussed individualized education programs, or IEPs. An IEP contains individualized goals, services, and supports for an eligible student with a disability. Although an SLP may develop and monitor communication-related goals, the entire IEP is a team responsibility. The special educator emphasized that the best planning happens when the SLP, special education teacher, general education teacher, family, and other professionals communicate with one another. It's a group effort. This connects with Bandura's idea of reciprocal determinism, which is personal factors, behavior, and the environment continually influence each other. A student's communication difficulty affects classroom participation, but the classroom environment also affects how successfully the student communicates. Changing only the student is not enough. Educators may also need to change their language, expectations, materials, or classroom routines. My field experiences extended this theory by showing what environmental change looks like in practice. It requires coordination. A communication strategy used only during one weekly therapy session may not transfer to lunch, home, or the general education classroom. Teachers and family members need to understand the strategy and use it consistently. Consistently being the key word. Beginning school-based SLPs should explain how a student's communication needs affect academic performance. They should also seek information from teachers and families, as well as build goals that matter outside of the therapy room. Collaboration does not mean everyone performs the same job. No. Rather, it means that each team member contributes information that the others just may not have. Now, I want us to look into how SLPs that are in schools and educators can use technology in a meaningful way. One of the clearest examples of meaningful technology from my field experience was augmentative and alternative communication, also called AAC. The SLP described using communication boards, tablets that produce speech, and programmable Big Mac buttons. These tools can help students express wants, needs, choices, and social messages when speech alone does not meet their communication needs. AACs don't remove a disability, and it should not be treated as a last resort or as a replacement for the student's existing abilities. Its purpose is to give the student greater access and independence. A device is meaningful only if the student can use it with real people in real situations. That means educators and families also need to know how the system works. The vocabulary must be relevant, the device must remain available, and the student must have frequent reasons to communicate. Leaving an AAC device in a backpack or using it only during therapy defeats its purpose. These 4 tips apply across student populations, but they should not be applied identically to everyone. Striving readers and writers may benefit from explicit vocabulary instruction, visual organizers, modeled examples, and directions divided into smaller steps. Bilingual and multicultural students require educators to distinguish between a language difference and a language disorder. They may require information from families, interpreters, and assessment across languages rather than judging the student only by English performance. Gifted students can also have communication disorders or disabilities. Simplifying the language used to explain a task does not mean reducing the intellectual level of the task. Educators should make directions accessible while continuing to provide challenging content. Students with significant exceptionalities may need individualized goals, AAC, repeated modeling, environmental changes, or additional processing time. Fairness does not mean giving every student the exact same support. Fairness means giving each student meaningful access to learning and communication. So, with that being said, what did we learn? Before these experiences, I understood that school-based SLPs provided therapy and participated in special education. After speaking with these professionals, I understand more clearly how much of the job involves advocacy, consultation, collaboration, and changing the environment around the student. I learned that behavior perceived as defiance may come from confusion or frustration. I learned that communication depends on psychological safety. I learned that modeling and scaffolding can turn complicated expectations into achievable steps. I also learned that technology is only valuable when it gives a student authentic opportunities to participate. In my own practice, I plan to communicate closely with general and special education teachers, involve families in meaningful decision-making, explain students' communication needs to school staff, and encourage consistent use of AAC and other supports. But most importantly, I want to create environments where students can ask for help, make choices, and advocate for themselves without being embarrassed. My educational stance is that successful special education is collaborative, individualized, and responsive to what student behavior may be communicating. To beginning educators and school-based SLPs, do not begin by asking, why won't the student do what I ask? Begin by asking, what might be preventing the student from understanding, communicating, or participating? And what support can I provide? That change in perspective can change the way we teach. More importantly, it can change the way a student experiences school. I hope you all learned something and hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.